Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to our channel and thanks for logging on. Today we have a clash of past and present integrated bracelet base metal sporty style watches for men. This is Octo Finissimo Automatic versus Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Jumbo, jumping straight into the Octo. This is the challenger, there's no doubt, a watch that only debuted in 2017 but with a bang, immediately winning the men's watch category in the GPHG, effectively the Oscars of watchmaking, and that's one hell of an accolade. The timepiece is easy to wear. Now on my wrist you can see that it's nice and slim, almost unnervingly light, and it is truly flat. The Royal Oak is extra thin, but this is beyond that. This is almost flush with the skin. Once a little bit of pressure is applied to the strap and it's sized properly, it sits almost flush with your wrist hair, and it is slim, 5.1 millimeters as my calipers measure it. Zoom out a little bit, you can get a better sense of it in proportion to my 16 centimeter circumference wrist. The timepiece is broad, it's 40 millimeters, but you'll find that lug to lug it's quite reasonable in its outright dimensions, as it only stretches. Bracelet end links included 48.8 millimeters, which means though it's a large timepiece, in terms of wrist real estate, it can still fit on a wrist as small as 14 centimeters circumference. Now it does have a conventional set of lugs, and if you look underneath, you can see that the interface is classical spring bars, nothing exotic or proprietary here. It's simply 30 millimeters wide, so you're going to want to have a custom strap cut if you go that route, or use the factory alternatives that Bulgari is offering. The watch in my hand represents a 2018 model year special series of 200. It was a boutique exclusive with these blue applique, or I should say blue transferred lacquer style dial features. They are transferred, they are applied using a classical application method, a balloon with a little bit of lacquer attached, and so the dial is remarkably flat, titanium and completely media blasted. It has the exact same texture as the bracelet itself, and you can see the bracelet's individual links are remarkably slim, so it feels fluid on the wrist, almost like a very supple silk, not like a set of metal hinges joined together. And you can see on the underside it's dramatically flared and tapered to match the size of the lugs, but you'll also see that there are gaps so it can vent the wrist on a hot day. This is very much a sporty watch. Neither one of these is a swimmable timepiece, but it will feel and look good in hot weather or during activities. Now the timepiece features the same blasted finish on its bracelet. To break up the monolithic appearance and monotone, you can see how the individual links are stepped down somewhat where they join to their opposite numbers. You can see bars are used to retain the bracelet being ultra thin. There's no room for screws. The bracelet itself is titanium, and you can see that it has springs effectively cut into the mechanism. Close it all up and you can see it's almost seamless with the Bulgari logo, classical Roman style V in place of the typical Bulgari U. I should clarify this because a lot of people ask about it. Is it Bvlgari or Bulgari? Well, the logo is, as you see here, the name of the company as it's spoken and written in ad copy is Bulgari with a U. Now that that's settled, let's talk about the case. As complex as the AP is, this one is more so. Bulgari claims 110 individual facets, all of them chiseled, shapely, almost architectural in their form. The Octo case shape was inherited from the former Gerald Genta works, so it has a history that is decidedly pre-Bulgari, though not quite as ancient as they like to say. They often say that their watches in the Octo family take after Roman architecture. In fact, it's a very quirky Swiss man and the brand named after him. Remember, Gerald Genta, the manufacturer, became Bulgari in 2010. The dial is exceptional. It is remarkably flush, flat, minimalist, but one feature I happen to adore is that there's an interplay of the round sapphire and round bezel with a faceted inner polygonal shape, and you can see that's what's framing the dial itself. There's a contrast and a tension between the two that I adore, and then there is no date, so if you don't like that feature, guess what? You're in the right place. The crown features double knurling. You can see the twin rows of knurling, as well as a faceted and polished black ceramic cabochon outboard. The movement, we really deserve to give this movement its spotlight solo because it's a special piece. The movement itself is in-house, executed at Bulgari's former Gerald Genta-Daniel Roth manufacturer in Le Sentier, Switzerland. It's not that far away from Breguet, Audemars Piguet, Blancpain, and of course Jaeger LeCoultre, all of them in the Valet de Jeu. And this movement right here in the finest traditions of the Valet, you can see micro rotor automatic with a platinum rotor and ceramic rotor bearings, 55-hour power reserve, 21.6 beat rate, but a full balance bridge, both to brace it against impact and also to add stiffness to the movement plate itself, which though 36.6 millimeters across is only 2.23 millimeters thick, and it is hand finished. You'll look, if you check out these chamfers underneath a lens or a loop, they are mirrored, they are rounded, they are the real deal, not a machined bevel. And you can see that the Côte de Genève are laid down with abrasive wheel. They are darker on one side, lighter on the other. That varying gradient style crest, sign of the real deal. All screw heads black polished with chamfered slots. It's a good looking movement, and again solidly above average power reserve, and the beauty of a manual with the convenience of an automatic thanks to that platinum winding mass. You can see no costs cut here. This is a full service, everyday, wearable ultra thin that makes no excuses and uses no circus techniques to achieve that ultra thin profile. No movement built into the case back or any such thing. Okay, the contender, and this is the champion. First launched in 1972, and that is, properly speaking, the origin of the species for this watch. The Royal Oak Jumbo was a sensation in its day, a steel watch that cost as much as a gold watch, a sports watch that was built with the uncompromising standards of materials and finish that you would find on a dress watch. Still 39 millimeters, the 15202 as we know it has been with us since 2012. There have been revisions along the way, but this is the closest living relative to the original Gerald Genta 5402 of 1972. 39 millimeters in stainless steel. It's thin, but it's not Bulgari thin. 8.1 millimeters thick against roughly 5.1, 5.2. The watch is broad across the wrist in a way the Bulgari is not. You can see on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, this has a wingspan. It doesn't wear like a 39, it wears more like a 41 or a 42. And it's 47.8 if you include the lugs, but you're going to find that these double plots that join the bracelet to the case extend the watch, and that little bit of flare, you can't push the bracelet down any more than that, extends it to a beefy 52 millimeters across the wrist. So I would say no smaller than 14.5 centimeters circumference for this watch. It wears large. You get a good sense of the level of energy invested in these watches because there is so much hand finishing, but you really need to see them crystal to crystal to get a sense of just how dramatically different they are in thickness. One is thin, the other is truly ultra thin. I'll also mention that the Audemars Piguet is beautiful in that there is more nuance to its finish than you'll find on the Bulgari. The Bulgari is all blasted, it's sharp creases. It doesn't really have any bevels or rounded forms executed by hand, whereas on the Audemars Piguet, you can see that expanding bevel running away from the case flank, flaring out over the lugs, and perfectly aligned along the shoulders of the links. That is all done by hand. You'll even appreciate the fact that the intermediate links feature polish on their facing that's only visible as you roll the bracelet through the light. You can see its vertical satin finish on the flank and its longitudinal satin finish on the top. And as with the Bulgari, there are gaps on the underside to vent the wrist and avoid pinching or pulling anything. Here, though, you can see the bracelet a bit more robust. It does have more metal. It also has a more convenient screw-fixed system, so this is an easier one to size by your lonesome. The clasp is also a bit meatier, and it offers a bit more peace of mind in that there is a trigger mechanism to keep this one shut. It only opens when you want it to open. There's no friction fit system at play. Jumping back to the case, you can see that the bracelet is fit with screws, so it's also fixed to the case using screws, very secure. The bezel gasket is fully expressed here, and you can see it's a part of the styling of the watch. It's a layered construction, very mechanical. It's a machine ethic, and you have perfectly aligned creases from the bezel to the mid case to the case back. And note, this is old school Royal Oak case construction. It's effectively a monobloc, as what appears to be the case back is integral with the case itself. There is a sapphire, but there is not a screw fixed case back that you can pull off. Everything loads through the front of the watch. The bezel is immaculately finished. You can see the hex pattern of the crown to match the hexes of the bezel bolts, and they are white gold properly on the Royal Oak as opposed to the offshore where they're steel. You can see they're polished and they're slightly more yellow than the white of the steel, and there's a material contrast as well as a finishing contrast between the polish and the satin finish here. The dial on the Royal Oak is more nuanced, and not just because it has a date. Yes, you have that feature, but if you look at the dial base itself, it's cut on a pantograph, which is a mimicry engine that has been used to make this sort of template copy since the 19th century, and since 2012, Audemars Piguet does this in-house with its own pantograph, and it galvanizes blue. The blue is exclusive to boutiques, and it is the highest rejection rate of the dials offered: the gray, the silver, the black, and the blue. The blue is the toughest to make, which is why it's the boutique model. White gold indices, and if you could look at the hobnails underneath those indices, you will see that there's a very fine texture between the hobnails and over their surfaces. You can actually loop this dial and get a great deal out of the experience. Of course, the hands, the AP logo, the indices themselves, all white gold, and when you turn the watch over, you can see the movement. This is Audemars Piguet caliber 2121. It's not quite as slim as what you get in the Bulgari, but it has an impeccable patrimony. Originally designed by Gerald Genta, the caliber 920 back in 1967, this movement was used by Patek, Audemars, and Vacheron, the three brands that commissioned its use. JLC never built a watch with this caliber. It's important to note, this is the same movement that was in the original 1972 Royal Oak, the same movement from Vacheron's 222 of the same period, and the same movement from the original 3700 Nautilys Jumbo. The timepiece featuring a free-sprung Gyromax balance, the free-sprung Gyromax beaten away to quirky vintage 19,800 vibration per hour rate. That was all the rage back in the late 60s and 70s. There is a winding mass, but if you look closely, you can see there's a ring all the way around the movement. It is a full circular winding mass with one side bearing the skeletonized gold, but there are 4 ruby rollers underneath the 4 corners of that ring, so you can have a very flat rotor that's sunken into the same plane as the bridges with no danger of it contacting the movement base plates. The finish is gorgeous, but as you can see, there's always a little bit of an obstruction on account of the rotor itself, one of the imperfections of a conventional automatic movement. 3.05 millimeters thick in this variant with the date. It's also not quite as slim as the movement in the Bulgari, but it is beautiful, and 50 meters water resistant versus 30 in the Bulgari. I wouldn't swim with either of these watches, but they are both gorgeous. The hand finish, everything from the screws to the Côte de Genève to the execution of the rotor to the chamfer of the bevels, it does match the Bulgari. It's just not as visible. So let's talk about advantages for these two watches. Audemars Piguet, this is pretty obvious. It is an icon that is time-tested. It defies the ravages of age. It will never look dated, and 50 years from now, this will be recognizable not just as an Audemars Piguet, not just as a Royal Oak, but as a jumbo. Also important, these watches are both still available new, and the Audemars Piguet offers you a 5-year warranty versus 2 for the Bulgari. So on that basis, advantage AP. Do you want your watch for daily use? Then you're probably going to appreciate the fact that this dial has both lume and a date. That is very practical. There's a bit more water resistance. Again, neither one of them swimmable, but every little bit counts. 5 ATM to 3 ATM with the Bulgari. And of course, value retention, a watch that sells for $22,700 new and pre-owned, take a big deep breath, $38,000 to $40,000 right now, pre-owned. So this is a remarkable investment at the moment that, if you can get it new, offers impeccable warranty coverage and substantial increase in value right out of the dealer's case. That's abnormal. I can't tell you it's going to retain that value in inflation forever. That might be a thing of our era, but at the moment it obtains. Now, let's talk about status. If you're into the status and pomp of luxury brands, Audemars Piguet as a watch brand beats Bulgari 10 out of 10 times. Not my thing, but it's important to note. Now, the Bulgari, what does it have going for it? Quite simply, ergonomics. It's slimmer, it's lighter, it's narrower across the wrist, and titanium is hypoallergenic. It's more compact, it fits well on a small wrist. I might even recommend it for a wrist as small as 13.5 centimeters circumference. So if you have that very small wrist, or you want the ultimate and ultra-thin watch comfort fit beneath the cuff, this is your watch. I'll also mention that it has the feather in its cap of that GPHG win, which is still impressive. The men's watch category at the GPHG is very competitive. And it's also a watch that offers technical specs in excess of the AP, which may have JLC DNA, but in the modern era, this caliber BVL-138 is more advanced. 55-hour power reserve to 40. It features a platinum winding mass rather than rose gold. It features ceramic rather than steel rotor bearings. It features a full balance bridge rather than a half bridge. In short, this is just a techier movement with more modern specifications. It's also bigger, broader, and easier to see, so you get the full advantage of a movement sized and shaped for its case and completely visible within that case. Also important, this is a timepiece that has both factory and aftermarket strap options that look the business, and it's just a more natural match for a strap than the Audemars Piguet, which was only ever designed for its bracelet and only ever really looks right on its bracelet. Rarity. This is the 200-piece limited edition. You can see it's 1 out of 200. As scarce as the Jumbo is, there are fewer of these, and I would even go so far as to say there are probably fewer Octo Finissimo Automatics than there are Royal Oak Jumbos, and this will always be scarcer than Royal Oak Automatics in general if you want to expand to include the 15300, 400, and 500. Finally, I'm also going to mention that there's a dial balance here, as there is no date. For many folks, that will be a decision point aesthetically. A timepiece that, frankly, offers great value if you buy it pre-owned, because you can pick it up for about $10,500 to $11,000. It sells new for $14,300. If you don't want the limited edition, it's $13,900. So you can get into this watch for a hell of a lot less money than the Audemars Piguet. So which of these two is my favorite? Well, I love the JLC background, the authentic history, the time-tested qualities of the Audemars Piguet, and I am a little bit of an AP fanboy, so I like this watch. That said, I prefer the Challenger. This is a heretic, a rebel, challenging the aristocracy of the watch world and doing it with panache. This is a watch that I enjoy aesthetically. Technically, I like the concept of Bulgari moving into the men's space with a manufactured product of this caliber. It's a little bit of a heretic, but at the same time, it somehow accomplishes that mission with excellent manners and real style. Guys, this would be my choice. Let me know in the comments below which one would be yours.